So this is my overall stage experience at Hartlepool, because this was like my first ever thing on a proper stage, if you will, with like wings and everything else. So this is the performance side of things. The ensemble scenes went well. Everybody knew everybody else's cues, when to go, when to leave, when to improvise and when to stop. And when I say when to stop, there was in the high street scene, everyone literally had to stop moving. And that was when Grace sang one of her lines as everybody else sang. The rest is sort of like an abstract sort of thing, and everybody knew when to stop and when to sing and when to go, when to leave, and that went really well. The scene groups as well, they were really great. They all had a good dynamic, and I thought my scenes went well and each worked with the people that I was working with. And as an individual, I think I did okay for my first piece in a proper theatre setting. I could have worked on my accent a bit more, I think. And accents, I normally do a phonetic script, so it's like writing out all the how to say each word in an accent. And I think I didn't have time to do that, and I think next time I would make time to do that, so then I know how to do it. For voice and movement, following feedback from our tutors, was projection, and that was in my mind quite a lot of the time, because the one-to-one group feedback was helpful with that, as then I was like, because then we had like peer feedback as well, and projection was a big one for me, so it was always in the back of my head. Like, I was doing one of my scenes, I could feel myself getting quieter, and then I'd just think, oh, projection, I need to keep going, so I'd project a bit more. And movement as well, I had to change my staging a bit on one of my scenes, because I'd have my back to the audience or I'd be blocking someone, so I had to try and remember that staging for the final show to try and avoid that from happening. We were all really professional. The professionalism was high during our time. We were offering each other advice and tips, and it felt nice because at Middlesbrough we all have our own little groups that we all stay in and do scenes in, but like we were all together in this one. It was good, we were all together, so we were all like one big group. Like, I spoke to more people that I don't normally speak to at Middlesbrough, like so that went really well. Like, we were all working together, giving each other advice and tips and things. And we had to adapt to the stage as well. It was quite simple because although it was bigger, it was still a similar size to what to the rehearsal space that we had at Middlesbrough, so it wasn't too much of a change. We just had to drag out movements and stuff a little bit more and make sure we'd sort of like put it in proportion as to where we were on Middlesbrough on the actual stage. And we had to change some staging slightly for entrances and exits, because there was no run around, there was no back walkway or whatever it's called. There's lots of different names for it. But thankfully I'd been cut from one of the scenes, so not much staging needed to be changed. As for flexibility, I had to improvise during the open dress rehearsal for one of my scenes, because with the script is quite complicated, so it's a lot of copying. So one of the lines jumped and I was like, okay, I need to keep going with this and just see what happens. But yeah, it went well, and I had to change some of my final lines and things during the final performance, and that was a bit of a script change, but it didn't really make much difference. And adapting to the stage space and working with different props and sound effects as well, we were all quite flexible with that. And again, with the professionalism, we were all really patient, because we all knew that we needed to make sure that everybody else was ready before we went on, and ensuring everyone was ready for the next run through, ready for their next scene, had gotten changed, because some people had a lot of quick changes to do. So yeah, so for example, there's two people that are in the boardroom scene, so they're in like smart suits or shirts or whatever, and then I have to run off and put football shirts on to go onto the train station scene, and then come off and get changed again for the funeral scene following. So there is a lot of quick changes that need to do within the space of about 3 scenes right at the end, so everyone else was patient enough to just stay out their way, let them get changed and then go back on. So that went really well. On the production side of things, tech day was a bit of a drag, but we all knew that was coming. There's never really a smooth tech day. And I had to use one of my new props and it went fine, but that meant that I was a little bit delayed on one of the run-throughs because it wouldn't stay up. I had an umbrella and I pushed it up and it come out, and then within a second it collapsed, and it nearly collapsed in on my head. So I was like, okay, great, what can I do now? So I just had to make sure that I had to put it up early to make sure that it was probably when it was going to stay up before I went and did my scene. And also with tech day we had some random sounds playing, which wasn't always the greatest. And we had to wait for tech to be ready before we did some of the scenes if they were doing a run through with some of the bits. But yeah, it went okay, but yeah, it dragged, like in the sense of the scenes and everything, it went okay. And lighting as well. Lighting was great and the colours worked really well in most settings. Pouring and Sipping was my favourite because of all the blues and that, and then the lightning flashes as well. One of them did actually scare me in one of the run-throughs because I wasn't expecting it. I was looking right up and then there was just this blast light and I was like, oh. But yeah, I absolutely loved the lighting and Pouring and Sipping. It was my favourite. And the sounds worked really well apart from some were delayed. And with the sound and lighting, we did have, on the final show, we did have a little bit of improvisation to do at the start because we were meant to start on a blackout, but we didn't have enough time for it to, so we had to walk on instead, which we had rehearsed at the Middlesbrough campus, so we kind of knew how to do it. So we all got on, it all worked well. We did have a sofa in that scene as well. It was a birthday party scene, which was the first ever scene that we had to perform. But the sofa did get in the way in a lot of the scenes, and I felt like sometimes it was overused and it wasn't always needed, and that led to us changing staging a bit too close towards the actual show day. And then I think the scenes were better once the sofa was permanently off and out the way. But I can understand why it was on right at the start and altering the staging, because it's better than dragging it off just to put it back on again. Like it's easier. And a lot of people said it was difficult to move as well, so moving it around can sometimes be a bit of an issue. And also with sets, costume and things like that, I liked my costume except for my shoes. They were not the most comfortable, and my hat could be annoying in places to do with the lighting, so I had to have it right like back and make sure that I could still see the lights from underneath it. So I had to like adjust it right before I went on night to adjust it in some scenes. So that was the only problems I had with my costume. I liked the rest of it, but yeah, my shoes and my hat were a little bit annoying. And props, the bucket was quite big. The charity donation bucket was quite big, so it was difficult to try and retrieve money and props from the bottom to put in my hat. My umbrella was easy to use, but opening and closing in the wings was quite difficult, and I was a bit conscious of making too much noise. I don't think I did, otherwise somebody would have told me, but I was quite self-conscious of making too much noise. The coins that I had to use that River puts into my hat were fine, but I was conscious that they fall out the back of the hat because it's got like a little opening where you adjust it. So I was a bit conscious of falling it out the back, so I had to make sure I had my hand over the opening at the back. And again, the hat got in the way a lot, especially with lighting, so I needed to position it carefully, and sometimes I realised it was a little bit too far down while I was actually on stage, so I had to sort of like adjust it while I was on stage. And overall, final thing, the communication with the tech team. We didn't speak much to the tech team directly, but Gavin communicated really well between all of us, and they all did really well to make sure that everything was in the right place. So yeah.